Come up. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Trickedtins. Now, this episode is going to be a little bit different than any of the other episodes that you've seen. Now, those of you that have been following along on the channel, you guys know that my MacBook crashed a couple of months ago, and I sent it off to get it repaired. They told me it was going to get replaced. Well, I got it back finally, and it's the same MacBook that I had. They replaced the main board, which is fine. It works perfectly fine now, and that's all I really needed. But the best part is, I still had all the footage and video clips that were already edited and still in my Adobe Pro, which is what brings me to the heart of this video. I had the entire Jetboat Build to the stage where we started in the first episode of that already recorded. The whole footage was taken inside of my shop. This was before I built the shop that I'm working in now, where I'm secluded. I can do a lot of voice and stuff like that because it's not as loud. This footage was literally taken right in the middle of my shop. There was guys all around me, employees working, machines running. There was no way I could do vocals in there. So the whole thing is recorded as a time lapse. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna narrate for you and tell you exactly what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, while we're watching it together. I hope you guys enjoy it. What do you think, Bandit? Let's get back to work. All right, guys, so as you can see, this front deck framing is a little different. This entire boat build is pretty much that, an entire boat build. I built the front of this bow with a diamond plating on here. I did not have any footage of that, but that took me about 8 hours to make those and get those installed. Then I started framing off of that height. It wasn't easy to figure out exactly how I was gonna do it because everything was new. I just figured I'd start framing with the two long pieces, kind of guess at a distance, and then we'd go from there. I started framing this thing out the same way I always do, with using some 1x3 rectangular tubing. I had a general idea of how I was going to lay this thing out. We were talking about doing the center console. Originally, it was going to be farther back. I was going to set this deck up with two big storage compartments, and then I was going to put the recessed foot pedal tray up front. He was going to have a trolling motor, draft bridge, kind of very similar to the bass boat layouts. This frame was a little bit difficult because I had to make sure that everything was floating. I could not weld this into the side of the hull or the front permanently because I knew that once I got this thing framed out and tacked up, eventually I was gonna have to take this entire deck out and flip it over and weld this thing solid from the back. Now this boat is a 180 horsepower motor in it. I need to make sure that all of this metal work is pristine. It needs to be strong. It's going to be seeing a lot of vibrations. The whole point of it is to run it up over rocks and stumps and run into stuff. What I'm doing here, I'm basically building the vertical wall of the back deck. Now, I guessed at this height of this, I thought it was going to work out. Later on in a different video, I came back and I had to shorten that. It just wasn't going to be streamlined, and I had to make sure it was perfect. Here, I'm framing out my side panels. Now, these side panels were originally going to be rectangular. I actually came back and made these tapered, so they're shorter in the front and longer in the back. One of my employees had the idea to shape it like a jet wing, and we ran with it, and it turned out sick. Right here, I'm putting in his framing for the recessed foot pedal tray. I'm not sure what trolling motor he's going to go with, but I left 10¼ inches in here. That way I can fit any recessed foot pedal tray in here that I might need. You see we got a couple of these hatch track frames made sitting on the front deck. A lot of times I will build those as I'm going just to get that part done for fitment. Now I made a template. This is my tapered piece because this hatch that's going in here is going to be a tapered hatch. It turned out sick, and you guys will see these later on in the build video. I'm checking to make sure that everything is square from the back of the transom, and now I'm going to weld these in. I'm not welding them solid, but I put some good welds on them because I know that everything might be potentially moved in the future. As you can see, this is in the middle of my shop. I've got employees everywhere and lots of stuff going on. Now it's time for me to burn out these hatch lids. The CNC plasma cutter literally got us through COVID. It is the greatest investment that we have ever bought in the history of professional welding services. Second behind that purchase would be this one for this hydraulic press brake. This thing is 180 tons. It can bend 1/4-inch plate in a 13-foot section. I have a ton of dies for this thing, and it comes in handy when you're making all these pan lids for all the hatches. Now that brings us to the gas tank. Originally, we were going to use the plastic gas tank that came in the jet ski, but the size of it was wonky, it was weird, it wasn't going to fit up underneath the front deck or the back deck for that matter, and there was just no way to use it. So he brought me this tank. He already had this tank. I think it honestly had like vegetable oil in it or something. It definitely didn't have gasoline in it. There was some gunk in it though. The thing about this tank is it was a foot too long, and it had a baffle in the center of it, so I couldn't just take a foot off of one end. I had to cut both ends down about 6 inches. I wanted to reuse that baffle and leave it so that it would actually do something inside of this tank. I've built a lot of tanks. Majority of the tanks I build are a whole lot bigger than this. I mean, we're talking 80, 100 plus gallon tanks, big ones that drop down inside of the hull of these fiberglass boats. They're all the same though. They basically have a big fill. That's what that black hose on the table on the left is for. That's going to run to the outside of the console, and that'll be where you fill it from. The blue line is going to be for your sender and your vent tube. And then it has another attachment in the center, which is basically for your gas gauge. It has a drop-in float system, and that'll hook up to tell you how much gas is in the tank. I welded this thing up solid, and then I put a coat of paint on it. I wanted to get this thing done. I thought it was finished. Fortunately, it wasn't. This is what it looked like before, and this is what it looked like after I was done with it. I did have to come back. I think it was episode 3. I had to alter that gas tank, and it looks a little different now. As you can see, I just cleaned it up really good, wiped it down with some acetone, and painted it. And that gets us into the center console. Now this was kind of tricky because we want this console to be high enough where you can stand up, but we also want it to be low enough where you can sit on a leaning post, which is going to be incorporated into the build shortly. Now I had my brother help me with this design. We looked at a bunch of these little center console boats like this, and this was the idea that we came up with. I think it looks aggressive. It's definitely different. It's not exactly like anything we saw. And I added this custom grab bar on the front of it. All the angles were mitered cut and welded together. I didn't have my pipe bender at this time. I think the thing looks sick though. I mean, I'm excited about standing up and using this thing and driving this boat around. It's going to be insane. I mean, I've driven a lot of jet skis. I've never driven a jet boat before though, especially not one that I've made. So that's really the whole driving force for getting this build done. And I'm stoked that I actually have this footage to share with you guys because I thought this was gone. These are the lost tapes of the jet boat. There's a lot of welding in tight little corners, but we made this thing look good. I really wanted these beads that I put on here to really look good just because I knew they were going to be seen forever. And here we are back in the press brake. We're bending up these tapered hatches. This was pretty cool because one of these is going to be a rod locker and the other one's going to be for storage. Both of these are going to have like I think 10 or 12 inch pans inside of them. They're basically like a false floor to leave room for the cables and wiring and lines and electrical stuff to run underneath of these hatches. But this boat is so big, I'll have plenty of room inside of here for him to fit tons of rods and storage in here. Drilling lots of holes and putting lots of rivets in these hatches. I put them every 2 inches apart. I want to make sure that this thing is never going to get loose and he's never going to have to worry about it. You only get one shot at this. Here, I'm putting a stiffener in here. This is a gigantic hatch. This thing is over 4 foot long. I think it's like 16 inches at the widest point. So this is basically just a hatch section, and I'll put these in the hatches if they need them, especially in the rod lockers. All the bigger ones, you know, it's important to have these in there because you don't want this thing to start flexing or have any bowing inside of your hatch at a later date. Now I'm putting a bunch more rivets up inside of the actual hinge frame. I think this hatch alone has close to 70 or 80 rivets in it. That's a lot of rivets. And as you can see, I'm putting these all in manually. This is before I got my Milwaukee M12 rivet gun. All right, she's all done. Let's drop her in the boat. Fits perfectly. Awesome. Come on. All right. Dog in the intro, dog in the outro. All right, guys, so the Jetboat build is sick. I mean, I'm excited about finishing this thing up. I'm stoked that I got these extra footage of this video to show you guys. I thought this stuff was gone forever, but it's not. And now you get to see the whole process. I'm gonna be dropping part 4, which actually I guess you could say is part 5 now, if you consider this part 1. Part 5 is pretty cool because I wrap up all of the installation of all the hatches and get a lot of this metalwork finished up. I mean, there's still a lot of internals and stuff to do, but I'm getting to the hump where I'm over and I'm gonna be coming down. This thing's gonna be getting painted soon. And I already have turf and stuff for it, so it's gonna be badass, man. I'm excited about it. But I appreciate you guys watching. Hit that like, subscribe button, leave a comment. I'm just excited I got to share this footage with you guys. I gotta get back to work though. I'll see you guys next time.